Hey, Dr. Pani, I just want to say that I still remember a beautiful surgery you did in Delhi. Yeah, congratulations again.
Yes.
Master, a master.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to see your talk. Thank you.
Right,
thank you, Dr. Sankla, for inviting to give a speak, to give a talk on suprasellar meningiomas. We have totally two contradictory talks. Dr. Dugani spoke that it has to be transcranial for all cases, and Dr. Daniel spoke that 90% of them should be transnasal. But then for the audience, it's confusing that what is the right way to do? Is it transcranial or transnasal? And at the end of talk, people, especially residents, get confused what is the right thing to do when they get a case. So my talk will be summarizing both the two approaches, and then what we practice over a period of time. As Dr. Dev Pujari was telling, we have graduated from doing bifrontal anterior interhemispheric approach to frontotemporal FTOZ to TML approach to endoscopic approach. But then what do we practice at the end of 20 years, and what history has taught us, and what do we do now? If you go back to 2020, everybody was gaga over endoscopic surgery for antechular lesions, and the advantage was bilateral access to the tumor, early devascularization of the dura, as Dr. Daniel said, and removal of the hypertrophied bone. It's like making operating a convexity meningioma from the nose, and it avoids the optic nerve retraction, so the incidence of visual deterioration is less and cosmetically appealing. A shorter length of hospitalization is a misnomer. It is not true. It is the same as the transcranial. This came in 2014. But over a period of time, how the literature has changed. Now, this again came in 2013. And again, we had also done a review of transnasal or transcranial in 2009, where in meningiomas, like olfactory group meningiomas, the gross total resection, when one does endoscopically, it was 90%, but in transcranial, it was 94%. But the incidence of CSF leak in transcranial was reported as 9% as compared to 21% in endoscopic. And what is strikingly different was the visual function improvement was almost 78% or 80% in endoscopic and 63% in transcranial. Now this was the primary reason why everybody promoted that transnasal endoscopy should be done. But this was in 2014. And the similar studies for tuberculum sellae meningioma also, where the visual improvement was 87% in endoscopy compared to 61%. But then what is the CSF leak? The incidence of CSF leak, if one looks at 2000 to 2005, has been quite high. From 10%, it increased to 25%. Now it is downward trend. It has come down to 15%. Maybe after 2012, at present, it will be 10%, as Dr. Daniel said. So the CSF leak has been quite high, and which is a morbidity one cannot ignore. But the gross extent of resection has almost been similar, whether you do an endoscopic or transcranial or transnasal endoscopy. And the morbidity also has been similar, but actually the morbidity reported till 2012 was higher in the endoscopic cases than the transcranial cases. And what is the recurrence rate? The recurrence rate, the estimated recurrence rate in an endoscopy for olfactory group meningiomas was higher, and tuberculum sellae meningiomas was higher. And this was reported in 2004. These are all meta-analysis. This paper, which Dr. Prakash, which came in 2018, and they followed a scale, and they analyzed two centers and had 139 cases. In this, in olfactory group meningiomas, 70% were done transcranially and 30% are done transnasally. And they followed this score, which Dr. Daniel has already explained in detail. And And what the conclusion was remarkable, that the visual loss has no relation with approach. Whether you do transnasal or transcranial, the deterioration of vision has nothing to do with the approach, but it has to do with the grade of the tumor. The higher the grade, if there is involvement of the optic canal or encasement of the vessel, the deterioration of vision will be higher whether you do transnasal or transcranial approach. So this actually contradicts that endoscopy has a better visual recovery than the transcranial approach. Now, this was again another paper. They did an algorithm to decide which is better in intracranial meningioma. The two factors were taken. One is extension in front of the sagittal sinus in the MRI. Oh, I forgot to take that picture. The second factor was olfaction preserved or not, and the third factor is cribriform plate invasion is there or not. If one follows this criteria, in the 75% of tuberculum cellum and planum were done with an endoscopy, and 90% by transcranial. So if one follows algorithms also, people with having normal surgical skill, transcranial has not gone away, and transcranial actually has many times is better than endoscopy in new centers or people who started practicing neurosurgery, tumor surgery. Now, what have we done? Like this tumor, this is a suprasellar meningioma with an optic canal extension, and it is around the tumor. As Dr. Daniel was telling, if the tumor is lateral, endoscopy is not better, and this is surrounding the optic nerve. So, what is the better way? Is it anti-interhemispheric or a supraorbital subfrontal or a T-renal approach? And if one does a T-renal, whether one has to do from this side, ipsilateral side, or a contralateral side. Dr. Assis was mentioning that he always does a clinoid drilling so that he can mobilize the optic nerve. But then mobilizing the optic nerve can also cause a manipulation, can cause a potential chance of having visual deterioration following surgery. And that what is reported in literature, that the visual deterioration is higher in transcranial than endoscopy. So if one does a T-renal approach, is it on the side of visual loss, or one has to do an anterior-interhemispheric approach, or do a contralateral approach? If one goes through literature, which this Dr. Daniel already presented, that the chances of visual worsening in T-renal approach or FTOZ has been reported from 14% to 30%. And these are all approaches done from the ipsilateral side. Whereas when one does an interhemispheric approach, a bilateral frontal craniotomy, where you work medial to the optic nerve, anti-hemispheric, the visual deterioration has been reported from 0 to 10%. So this is quite a different, that it is probably better to do a unifrontal or interhemispheric approach, as the visual worsening is far less than doing a ipsilateral T-renal approach. Now, this is akin to endoscopic approach. In endoscopic approach, the visual worsening reported is 3 or 5%. So, if endoscopy probably is similar to anterior-interhemispheric approach, and if one does not want to do bifrontal craniotomy through an anterior-interhemispheric approach, then probably a contralateral approach is better. Now, endoscopy has also a lot of issue. Though size has not been an issue more than 3 centimeter, but small size tumor engulfing the optic nerve or engulfing the vessels is an endoscopy issue. Many times these are calcified, and calcified tumors, again, you do not have a lot of instruments to remove tumors through the endoscope. And the chances of CSF leak are high. And as we know, the satellite nodules in anterocranial fossa can go till 2 to 4 centimeters from the margin of tumor. And can we address these satellite nodules through an endoscopic transnasal approach, not endoscopic, transnasal? And what do you do when you have associated aneurysm? At least we have 3 cases where when you do the suprasellar meningioma, where had associated aneurysms found during surgery. It was not detected before surgery. Like this case. So instead of doing ipsilateral frontotemporal this thing, we prefer to do a contralateral approach. And this concept is not new. This was reported long ago in 2012, that contralateral approach to simplify surgery and favorable visual outcome in tuberculum cell meningiomas. The contralateral doing a DTI, like Dr. Dugani said, also helps in deciding which way to approach. Like this patient of a suprasellar meningioma, we did a DTI and the optic nerve is on this side. So we decided to operate, and the visual loss also was more on the right. So we decided to do from the left side so that we can dissect the tumor medial to the optic nerve as what we do in transnasal surgery. And all of us know that the planum sphenoidal or tuberculum meningioma usually do not arise from the midline. They have attachment either to the right or the left, and the visual loss depends on which side is the attachment. So the optic nerve normally is displaced to laterally. So if one works from the medial side, one can first devascularize the tumor and remove the tumor and do not touch the affected nerve. So in turn, the visual recovery is better. Now, this is one case of 37-year-old with visual loss on the right side for 3 months with headache, and it was a paramedian attachment on the right side. And this was the perimetry on the right and the left. Right had significant visual loss. So we did from the left side. Initially, we used to do a mini FTOZ, a single piece FT, frontotemporal orbital, not FTOZ, it's FTO. But nowadays we do with only TDONL. But FTO has the advantage of less of brain retraction. And this is the video. So this is the normal optic nerve, ipsilateral. This is the standard technique of opening sylvian fissure. The opposite optic nerve is identified. The advantage is that one can see the attachment of the tumor medial to the optic nerve, devascularize. And once devascularization is done, tumor can be dissected. Devascularize, internal decompression, and then you can see here, this is what is at the end of surgery. You can see the aneurysm, the paraclinic aneurysm at the end of surgery. And so this was the aneurysm which you dissected, and it's like a contralateral clipping of the aneurysm. I don't think this can be done with an endoscopic approach, and this surprises in endoscopy cannot be tackled. One has to do a second stage surgery, either a coiling or a transcranial surgery. This is just the steps of surgery. I had taken this just if the video didn't open. And this is post-op improvement. This is noticed. You can see earlier there's a definite change, and so patient had a visual recovery. And this is the post-op scan done at the end of 3 months. In our experience, we had done almost 13 cases. 8 of them, this data was 2 years ago. I have not added the recent data. Tuberculum cellular meningioma, we had 8, planum sphenoidal 4, and 1 was a craniopharyngioma. And the table shows all details of all the cases. All of them we did a contralateral approach. This is another case of a 56-year-old female with 2 years history of visual disturbance, normal hormonal assay. Right eye was more affected, and perimetry showed bitemporal hemianopia. And one can see here that the attachment was more on the right, so we did a left side approach. And here the tumor was extending also into the right optic canal. So doing from the left side approach, one can drill the medial, decompress the optic canal medially, and also take out the tumor which is going into the optic canal and decompress the optic nerve. And this is the pre-op visual perimetry, and this is the post-op at 3 months. And the patient had a significant recovery. And this is the post-op scan. This is another case of with a 3-month history of progressive visual loss, and presented with no perception on the right side, and he had a near normal on the left side. And this patient, had means we never expected that, but he had a immediate post-op, his right side vision improved, like what we see in the pituitary tumor. This experience I did not have when I used to do a ipsilateral approach. Following with a contralateral approach, I've seen patients having visual recovery immediate post-op period also. And this was the post-op scan. So of the total 13 patients, the average size of the tumor was 2.2 to 2.5. They're good for endoscopy, but then here one can coagulate the dura, the satellite nodule. So the incidence of recurrence, I'm sure, will be less than that endoscope transnasal approach, though I do not have a long-term follow-up. But the literature has convinced us that the long-term recurrence rate will be less. We had grade 2 resection in 12 cases and grade 3 resection in 1 case. Early post-op recovery improved in 9 cases out of the 13, and static 4 cases, and 1 case had worsened. Long-term visual outcome remained the same statistics. We compared with our visual outcome, which we had published earlier, comparing for tuberculum cell meningioma, we reported of 43 cases, comparing anterior interhemispheric with terional. In that, we had reported that we had only 27% visual recovery, like 11 out of 41 had recovered when we had done an anterior interhemispheric or terional approach. But in these cases, we had 70% had significant recovery. So in our own hand with the same surgeon, we have improved our results from 27% to 69%, which is quite convincing that a contralateral approach probably is useful in visual recovery. And it has the added advantage of treating the satellite nodules, treating the unexpected aneurysms, and it does not have the added disadvantage of having the 10% incidence of CSF leak. In conclusion, planning a contralateral approach to the amblyopic eye has a better outcome than doing an ipsilateral approach. I know Ashish Suri may not agree, but that's the conclusion, that contralateral reduces manipulation of the involved optic nerve, and it visualizes the attachment inferomedial to the nerve. Hence, the outcome is better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Manas, for this great presentation and the concept of the contralateral craniotomies. I think, Ashish, you have some question for Manas?
Absolutely beautiful lecture and demonstration. And I think this is actually a truth. Actually, you only heard half of my statement earlier. I didn't speak this. When I was a resident with Dr. Banerjee and then Dr. Mehta, it was always there that you can, for a meningioma, you can always, for tuberculum cell meningioma, it is always the contralateral. You can always dissect, like you're absolutely right, and I always used to do that. You can always dissect when you are facing the nerve, so not under the nerve. So if the tumor is under the nerve and there's a lot of adhesion over that, it's always better that you are contralateral. If it is a direct terional approach. But then my later training with Vinco, and then I did myself. But the moment you take the ICP out and you cut the falciform ligament, and you don't need to, and actually it doesn't do any damage. I think it's just another added 15, 20, or maybe half an hour extra. And you open the canal directly. The optic nerve becomes very free the moment you cut the falciform ligament, and then you can actually see the under, and without any manipulation you can dissect. But if you're not doing the ACP drilling, you're absolutely right, Dr. Manas. You have to do contralateral. Otherwise, unless the nerve is practically PL negative, and you may not do any more damage to it. I think you're absolutely right. If you are only terional, then contralateral is the right.
Yes, this is a fact we are aware of, and even literature has already supportive about this contralateral approaches, not only at the supracellular region, at the other places also. And we do agree with you, Manas, for whatever the experience you presented. Dr. Depujari doesn't agree with us. Dr. Depujari, please.
I have a serious objection to this for certain reasons I would like to mention. The title of your talk, Manas, was supraorbital approach. So I got a little misled, I must say. I thought you are going to talk about the virtues of supraorbital approach vis-a-vis terional approach, or that you can achieve something similar, etc. And probably endoscope assisted surgery is what I was expecting to see. Now, for the aneurysm which you showed, I think that is an extremely rare case, as you yourself will admit. And
I have few cases.
yes, I mean, I don't think everybody has 3 cases out of 70, 80, whatever number which you have said. So it's not a that common association, though it is possible. And for that, contralateral approach was perfect, without any doubt. But the traditional teaching has been you go from the side of the worst optic nerve. And one of the main reasons why we do that in tuberculum cellae meningioma is because, you know, when we discuss endonasal versus transcranial approach, one of the main reasons is that if there is optic canal involvement lateral to the optic nerve or superior to the optic nerve. And I think both of these are much easier to handle from the same side than compared to the opposite side. From opposite side, the advantage which you get is something very similar to the endonasal approach. You get access to the medial compartment and the inferior compartment of the optic canal. So I am a little doubtful about the advantage. I can definitely see that it has worked for you, and I think there are situations where it is a good idea, and this is one reason why you may consider still going up to the midline, even if you are doing terional, to have you know, turn your table and look at it from medially, etc. But I am not fully sort of buying the argument that contralateral approach is better than ipsilateral approach for suprasellar meningioma.
Suresh.
It all depends on, can I answer that?
I thank you, Manas, for excellent talk and excellent work. Congratulations and thank you. See, we have done almost more nearing about 280 cases of this suprasellar meningiomas. Somehow, as Professor Devpujari mentioned, all these cases we have been approaching from the side of the poor vision, which we have been doing it. Because few cases initially we did do this from the contralateral side, and we found out maybe our technique was not up to the mark or it's good, that there's a gross deterioration of vision in both the eyes. Already one eye patient has lost, and you operate on the normal side approach. Always there's a handling of the nerve on the normal side during dissection, and there may be, if the tumor is very vascular, we may end up using bipolar and cause a thermal injury to the normal optic nerve. And patient had a postoperative deterioration in many cases. So we switched it back again, approaching from the affected side. All the cases, of late, we have made a policy to operate. Already he has lost gross vision on one side. At least you'll have good vision on the opposite side, where you can very well decompress the opposite normal optic nerve under direct vision. That is my takeaway. That's it.
Manas, you want to respond?
Yeah.
Say something? Yeah.
The decision to operate ipsilateral or contralateral depends on the MRI finding. What Dr. Devpujari and Dr. Dugani have told is about large tumors. I agree with that. If you have large tumors where the attachment is midline, or we cannot actually make out the origin of the tumor, doing from the worst side is better. But when the MRI shows clearly the attachment, and if it's paramedian, then contralateral is useful. And 50 to 60% of the tumor have a paramedian attachment. Less than half only have a midline attachment. In a midline attachment, going from the worst side is good, but in a paramedian attachment, going from the opposite side is better.
No, I actually agree with Manas and Suresh and Dr. Devpujari. It is very nice and simple to dissect the tumor. If you're operating from the contralateral side, you can actually see if the vision is marginally compromised on the affected side, and you can actually dissect the nerve, because usually the affected side nerve is nearly a lot of adhesions are there. And ipsilateral, I found that you're actually retracting the nerve. But here you can actually take the nerve, and with sharp dissection you can do that. But nonetheless, I've stopped doing that because I take the ACP on the same side and cut the falciform ligament. I think that's the best thing.
Manas, you are talking about a very selective group of patients, I think, because this rule cannot be applied on all patients who have unilateral tumor, eccentric tumor. So I don't think
and there's a
that is what everybody wants.
Canal drilling on the opposite side. Manas, what do you do about the optic canal drilling if on the opposite side? Usually there's a nice carotid cave, you can take out the tumor, but if you want to really check, I've drilled it, but I find it a bit odd on the opposite side, drilling the optic canal.
Yeah, Dr. Daniel has a question. After that, I'll tell you.
No. I just want to comment on this. The way I do is, like, I agree with Dr. Deo Pujari. I learned that way. I always, for large tumors, tuberculum cellae, and usually the side with more involvement is the side I come, because I can really decompress that optic nerve. I open the canal. I even remove the clinoid sometimes for these tumors, like Dr. Almefti shows. He always takes the clinoid. I don't do always, but I frequently will take the clinoid in the worst side. So all that I can only do if I'm approaching through that side. But I agree with you, Dr. Panigrahi. If the tumor is small and is immediate to the optic nerve, like paramedian, like you're saying, with the origin, then coming contralateral will be a better resection. The reason I don't do that is because I do that endonasal.
So you agree that contralateral, if one is doing transcranial, the contralateral is better?
Yeah.
I think there is a subset of tumors where it has definite advantage. Yes.
Optic canal, like drilling the optic canal contralateral, we have been doing it routinely. And actually, it is easier to drill the contralateral because the is thinner. We do it for BIH patients and for these paracrine aneurysms which have medially directed contralateral approach clipping, especially multiple aneurysms. So
yeah, I've done it sometime, a couple of times. I entered the sphenoid sinus also. So I find that drilling on the same side, because you can always preserve.
Yeah, it's the thin bones. Yeah. It's like so the sphenoid sinus will definitely get opened. So usually we put a pericranium there and put the fibrillar.
So basically, what you are saying is not only are you getting advantages of the endonasal approach, but you are getting complications also of the endonasal approach while doing it contralaterally.
Yeah, no, but the CSF, it is not a big opening. The CSF leak incidence is not 10%. Like an endonasal approach.
Dr. Deo Pujari is back with his new look, dashing new look.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Nair, please go ahead.
Just one thing. This is about the actual extent of canal involvement. So when we look at the relation of the falciform ligament, the optic nerve, and the dura around it, there is a preforaminal segment which is not actually into the optic canal. And after about 2 millimeters or 2.5 millimeters, you enter into the actual optic canal, which is the bony optic canal. So anatomically, when we want to remove tumors which have extended into the optic canal, some ACP drilling and unroofing the optic nerve with dural opening has to be done. And one of the reasons why some of these patients don't improve on MRI, when you see a tumor going into the canal and patients not improving after surgery, is because the optic canal has not been unroofed. Now, one of the reasons for visual deterioration following suprasellar meningioma surgery is actually the involvement of the superior hypophyseal artery, and probably not direct extradural manipulation of the optic nerve. So, for a tumor which has superior lateral extension into the optic canal, optic nerve unroofing after the anterior clinoidectomy, excision of the dura will definitely contribute to visual improvement. On the other hand, if the involvement is inferomedial, that is optic nerve that is below the endonasal corridor, we can not only decompress the optic nerves all the way to the orbit, but also open the dura along the course of the optic nerve and get a cuff of dura out. In this particular case, the optic nerve or the optic canal is opened superior to the ophthalmic artery, and this happens before the tumor decompression actually starts. So the canal has been unroofed, and the tumor manipulation starts after the canal has been unroofed. So at that point also, the optic nerve is protected. So these are my comments, but I think always comparing the transcranial to the endonasal corridor is an unfair comparison, because transcranial surgery itself has a very long history, and the number of patients who have undergone transcranial surgery in all our meta-analyses are very high. Out in period of
Prakash, we lost your audio.
Yes. Prakash, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Prakash, you
Yeah.
can probably
Better.
stop
Sir,
your.
can you hear me?
You have to repeat.
You can stop your video. Probably the
You can stop your video.
bandwidth is not.
Stop your video. So
Am
we can hear you.
I audible now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very nice.
Very
Nice. Now you can.
Very well.
Last
Yeah.
15
What
please.
I was saying was that the comparison between the transcranial and the endonasal corridor is unfair, because traditionally it's more likely that patients who had larger tumors were selected for the transcranial corridor. The second thing is the learning curve in the endonasal corridor for a lot of centers is fairly, young. And so essentially the rates of complications, including CSF rhinorrhea, would probably be higher, as illustrated by Dr. Prevedillo's observation about the Pittsburgh series, where the rates are probably nearly 40% at the onset, but have been much lower now. So there will be always a definite bias in case selection and experience when we compare these series. So I think on a case-to-case basis, we should probably go by MRI appearances and the comfort level of the surgeon themselves when we decide upon the approach, rather than.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely right, Prakash. Very good point, because the cases which we use for each approach are different, actually. They are different for the transcranial and this one. I fully agree with you. I also agree with you that how much do you, decompress the optic nerve? It is just the bony decompression, or you open the falciform ligament, you open the dura, and, remove that part of the dura and decompress the optic nerve. That really will decide, how much visual recovery you are going to have post-operatively. Very good. Thank you very much. Any other? Suresh, please go ahead.
One more technical thing I would like to share with the younger generation is that all this tuberculum cellae or planum or medial clinoidal meningiomas, we prefer to have, along with an MRI, contrast MRI, we prefer to have a CT with the contrast and magnified views of the optic canal and the paracellular regions. Invariably, what is not seen on MRI, you see them on the CT scan, widening, erosion, and extension of the tumor inside the canal better on CT as compared to the MRI. This is another technical opinion I would like to share with them, so that you can plan the surgery very well. Drilling before surgery only, we have a plan of drilling the anticlinoids and decompressing and unroofing of the optic canal. If in your mind at the end of the surgery, you are ready for that.
Correct. I think that's a good point. Thank you very much, Suresh. Any other question? I think there are a few questions in the chat box, but most of them have been answered already. So if there is no other question, Prakash,
just one question for that, Dr. Prevedillo. Dr. Prevedillo, regarding your lumbar drains for the meningiomas, how long do you leave them in?
Very good question. So first of all, I don't use primarily for most of these cases. I do the resection, I do reconstruction, and I do not use a lumbar drain. The lumbar drain is if I take these patients back to the operating room. So then if they leak, then okay, leaked. So I go there, repair, and then I put a lumbar drain and I leave for 5 days.
Okay.
Thank you.
I agree. I follow the same thing.
Great. Thank you. Okay, if there is no other question, I would request all the three panelists to just make the final comments. I start with Dr. Ashish Suri.
Yeah, we've had a
final comment about the approaches.
Final comment. There has been a beautiful spectrum of exhibition of beautiful surgeries by nightmarish tumors first by Dr. Suresh, and then beautiful endonasal by Danny, and then Dr. Manas giving a very nice balance, especially with the contralateral. But I personally feel that yes, I think it is ultimately we had some discussion on 3D versus 2D endoscopes. To summarize, I feel that it is we have to plan it as per the patient, like what Prakash was mentioning, and the MRI planning and the CT planning has to be there. But yes, there will be a subset of patients who can do very well with endonasal approach. Small tumors, I always go for endonasal. Though my number is not as big and they're not as huge tumors with what Danny does, but I learned from him, and we are increasing. But still, there's some dural specs which tumors which I leave have been left laterally, and we are learning. So that is still in the learning curve. Regarding the transcranial approach, we used to do a lot of them, the large ones, interhemispheric. That was long time ago. Now, then it became pterional. Both, there was a change between ipsilateral or the contralateral. But then I've ultimately found that a pterional, with or without FTOG, depending on the size, and an ACP drilling, with cutting the falciform, you don't have to cut the whole orbital the sheath, just the half of the optic canal, so that you can actually take out the tumor which is going in. And it actually widens the opticocarotid system, and you have a direct vision on the cellar and the diaphragma and the pituitary stalk where it's entering. That is an important area. So if you do that, I think you can give a very safe outcome.
Great, thank you. Your turn, Dr. Depujari. Just summarize these points, please.
I think we have seen some excellent surgical technique. I think the treatment of suprasellar meningiomas is constantly evolving. And as Prakash said, that we probably still don't know what is the best, and we need to, individualize treatment as for many other tumors, I must say. I think what we have learned is the importance of the contralateral approach, as Manas has told us. And from Danny's talk, my takeaway is that the size of the tumor itself should not be a major criteria. You have to analyze your MRI scan quite well. And I think it is the laterality of the tumor which has to be given certainly more importance. In addition to that, I have asked him before, and I think over a period of time, the criteria for two-stage procedure probably will become more clear. So that is something which will be a worthwhile addition to our understanding of, how to choose a particular approach. I think the earlier classification by Shekhar's group and recent classification with Capabianca and Danny together, which they have talked about, certainly gives us a better idea as to which are the cases which are better for endonasal. But in addition to that, I think the expertise of the team who's doing it, and especially the person who's going to be repairing it. I think these are very, very important things when we choose the approach. So I think overall we have had an excellent overview of the issue. There are some unresolved issues, but we are trying to get there so that we'll know how to treat our next patient better.
Thank you. Prakash.
I think everybody in this panel is very senior. I'm probably the junior most person still taking, infant steps into the area. So my perspective from this is that meningioma surgery, endonasal or open, is a complex procedure. When taken up from the endonasal corridor, it should be done after a person has acquired enough experience with pituitary, CSF leaks, and using the step ladder pattern that the Pittsburgh group has described earlier. The second thing is that the challenge from the endonasal route is the reconstruction, because we open into the planum, not just the chiasmatic sulcus. Reconstruction is a challenge, and whenever we do this, it should be kept in mind. The approach should be chosen based upon the lie of the tumor, rather than a predetermined dogmatic approach. So in patients where the canal invasion and the predominant part of the optic attachment, the attachment is lateral to the optic nerve, a transcranial approach probably is better. For central tumors with optic canal invasion in the medial aspect, the inferior medial aspect, probably the endonasal corridor is better. And I guess we live and we learn with every case. Correct. And our philosophies will probably evolve.
Thank you very much. Danny, your turn. Your question is, can you tell us about the future? What is the future of suprasellular meningioma surgery?
Very good question. What I think, what we'll see more and more in the future is in the genetics, like understanding the molecular of these tumors better. I just saw yesterday, it's interesting that you asked that, because I just saw yesterday, I think is a university in England, that they were able to find a marker that you do blood work and you can tell if the meningioma is grade 1 or grade 2, because the grade 2s produce this marker, goes to the blood. I forgot, it's like a acronym for it. But imagine that. So you can actually know if you're dealing with a more aggressive meningioma just by doing blood work. So I think we'll start seeing more of this type of approach where we know more. That will be important, for instance, for a cavernous sinus meningioma. Like if it is a grade 2, you're going to use a higher amount of radiation. So I think there will be a lot of this coming up in the future. I think meningioma is still a disease that I think is far away from us not to do surgery. I think we will be doing surgery for a while. It's a mass effect problem. I think our generation still be operating on them. I think different than what we are seeing in craniopharyngioma, where the papillaries are melting with medication these days with BRAF inhibitors. I think we're a little further away from meningiomas because they're more fibrous, and I cannot imagine something that will make them disappear. It would be nice to have something that make them soft for us to do surgery. If we could do that, so I think surgically speaking, it could be that we start seeing some robotics. The technology exists. Like some robots that you can put through the nostril or through small craniotomies and do approach with the robots. But I do think that is also a little far away because the companies don't have the interest of bringing that to neurosurgery. I talked to Intuitive. They have the Da Vinci robot. They make so much money with the abdominal surgery. They don't have interest in expanding to neuro. Like I offered to be a consultant to try to help to bring it to small sizes to do the same type of surgery using the robot for neurosurgery. They have the technology. They just don't have the interest of investing on pushing that to the next level. So I think that will be also part of the future if there is a company with the interest to financially push in that direction. So I think that will be the future, a combination of new technology for approaches and genetics and understanding the tumor for the future treating and possibly even with systemic medication to help us with meningiomas.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for your comments. And I think with this, we conclude this meeting. If there is anybody wants to ask, Prakash, anything you want to ask? Your comment?
I think I've had a wonderful experience meeting everybody and speaking to everybody. It's been really nice. Thank you so much.
So I thank all the speakers and the panelists to really join us today and make this meeting so interesting and so useful. So good night to everybody. And Danny, you have a good day. Thank you very much once again.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always an honor. I always learn so much from you guys.
Thank you.
Sunit, anything from your side?
Thanks, Suresh, for the invitation.
Sir, it was
Thank you, Suresh, and double Suresh, and Dr.
Thank you.
Danny, and Dr. Manas.
And Manas, yes. And
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much. It was an excellent learning. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dr. Sunil Jindal and his team, the Baxter team, to really come forward and organize this meeting for us virtually. Thank you very much, Dr. Jindal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.